Hello and welcome back to the Lowdown, everybody, and what an episode we've got lined up for you today. We are choosing your best signing over the last 5 seasons for every Big Six club. Today, we debate who has been a better signing for Arsenal, Saliba or Odegaard.
You've seen, since the moment he came in, how good they've been. You've seen them when he hasn't been there. You've seen him when he's returned.
Does Thiago Silva take the mantle over Cole Palmer?
They conceded 36 goals in that Champions League winning season in the Premier League, which was only second to City. They only conceded 4 goals en route to that Champions League.
And who deserves a shout out, if anybody, for Man United?
I don't think he's going to be on many people's lists, and I almost forgot about him because it was a short time, but it was a great time.
Hello and welcome back to the Lowdown, everybody. And look who's joined myself and Mikey McCubbin today. It's been long awaited. Liez Bouzidi is in the building, of SDS fame, Bleacher Report, numerous other places. Liez, it's not been a great week for Man United, but how are you doing?
Yeah, me individually, I'm doing all right. It's doing well. But once we start looking at the footballing side of things, that's where the mood kind of sours. But it's a pleasure to join you guys. I've been looking forward to it. And let's talk.
Yeah, it should be a great show. Today, we are going to choose every top 6 club's best signing of the last 5 seasons. So that's since the start of 2021, which is quite crucial to the cutoff of some of these clubs. So it covers the last 9 transfer windows. Let's start, I reckon, let's just get straight into it with the league leaders, Liverpool. Mikey, we'll let Liez adapt to his surroundings. Who was your pick for Liverpool, and who else did you kind of consider?
Yeah, I think Liverpool's an interesting one, actually, because there are a couple of clubs here where it feels like there is one obvious answer. Maybe you guys will beg to differ, but Liverpool, I think there's a few options, but there's still one clear winner for me. I think Liverpool's transfer business over the last 5 years it's actually been quite patchy. It's not been hit after hit after hit. It's not like it was in the early Klopp FSG days when it was, Van Dijk through, Salah wasn't it? Or like Mane first, actually, 2016. Mane one summer, Salah the next summer, Van Dijk and Alisson the following year.
Even the likes of Robertson, right?
Robertson as well, of course, through the door at the same time as Salah. And then I'm forgetting Fabinho came in the same Salah as Salah. It was just hit after hit after hit. It's, I can't really think of that as good a transfer record in modern history, really, as Liverpool had then. It has been more patchy since then, and out of the transfers over the last, since 2020, that summer, I had down Luis Diaz, Ibrahima Konate, Alexis Mac Allister, and Diogo Jota as my picks, and I think Diogo Jota is my number one. He's not been available enough, obviously, because of injury, and I think
that held me back.
That does mark him down, but he's just been so incredibly consistent when he has played, and given his lack of minutes, the fact that he's hit double figures for goals and assists combined in, I think, 4 of the last 5 Premier League seasons, I think just shows how, what an asset he's been to Liverpool. I think Mac Allister, if he'd had a year or 2 more in this side, I think probably, he probably will eventually take that. Gravenberch, if he stays on the course that he is under Arne Slot, I think he will eventually become, into this conversation. But I think, Jota, what he's shown so far, what he's shown across 4 years for Liverpool, I just don't think I've not really seen him have a bad game or more than one bad game in a row for Liverpool. That's why he takes it for me.
Yeah, I think that versatility is a key point as well. The fact that he can kind of play as a 10, a 9, out wide on the left as well. He's definitely been useful. I mean, before I give my opinion, Liez, did you have anyone different? Who else was in your thinking?
I did. I think I agree with all the names you kind of brought forward, because what makes Liverpool such an interesting team in this kind of conversation is the fact that, like you said, they already kind of had their core built under Klopp and under Michael Edwards, especially at the beginning. And the last 5 years, they've really kind of been adding pieces around that core. They're trying to find supplementary parts around that core. And like you said, Luis Diaz, Konate, Jota. I personally went for Alexis Mac Allister. You look at last season, right? First of all, to get him for that price, I think it was around 35 million. I think it was an absolute coup. You're talking about a World Cup winner. You're talking about an established Premier League player who was growing season by season at Brighton. So to get him for that price, when you were looking around the league at the likes of Caicedo going for over 100, Declan Rice going for over 100. By the way, great players in their own right. But to get Mac Allister, who, in my opinion, is up there with the best in the league for that low of a price. An absolute steal. And for me, that's like a vintage Liverpool signing right there. You don't really hear too much about it, and then bam, 35 million. And then you also look at that midfield, right? First of all, I think that was an area of concern, especially the season prior, where Liverpool had so many injuries and they were playing Milner at times, and Henderson was perhaps on his last legs. They really needed to rebuild that midfield. And in came Dominic Szoboszlai, who I think was the marquee. I don't think he's really got going to the level we expected. Endo had a few good moments last year, but has kind of slowly faded out. Gravenberch has had a really good start to the season this year, but never really got going last year. And in amongst all of that, Mac Allister has kind of just been, for me, the consistent, steady, versatile as well, too. He's started the season playing as a holding midfielder when they were looking for a Caicedo. Moved into an 8, can play as a number 10, offers you goals, offers you tenacity in there, a really good player in possession. I just think he's been absolutely crucial to Liverpool. And you have all these big names, but he's, for me, just the steady, consistent guy in there. I think it's been terrific business for them.
Yeah, I think you've both nominated my top 2. I had Jota at 2, purely on minutes. I think last season you ranked 17th in Liverpool's squad for minutes, the year before 14th. He has been more crucial this year. It feels like he is now their first choice striker. Darwin Núñez has not got the minutes that he probably expected or wanted at the start of this season. Cody Gakpo still, I think he's played really well, Cody Gakpo, but he doesn't feel like first name on the team sheet sort of territory. It feels like it's Luis, Diaz, Salah for sure, and then the third one seems like it's Jota at the moment. That maybe rotates as the season goes on, but I didn't think he'd played just enough minutes to be the best signing. Yeah. What I also thought was worth noting, actually, so in this period, Liverpool have only made 9 signings for over £20 million. Wow. And I'm going to compare that to the rest of the top 6. So City have made 12, United 14, Arsenal 15, 16 for Spurs, which kind of surprised me, 27 for Chelsea.
Obviously, 27 for Chelsea.
It just does go to show that in terms of investment in this squad, they haven't gone crazy in it. It has really been those stalwarts carrying them through.
And there have been summers where they've, like this summer just gone, where they've basically spent nothing, So yeah, Liverpool have been, and that was a source of frustration for Liverpool fans as well with FSG, especially in that kind of post title winning kind of era where that first season when Van Dijk was out for almost the entire campaign, Joe Gomez was out, and they really struggled. Going back to that summer when actually Jota was signed, but there wasn't an awful lot of activity. Otherwise, Thiago as well, and he was injured a lot. That was a real source of frustration for Liverpool fans. But it feels like, at least at the moment, because it's early days, of course, that with a new manager in who's already got his feet under the table, and with players who previously, especially in the case of Gravenberch, who didn't look so comfortable in a Klopp system, adapting really well to this new system, it feels like actually, it's beginning to work out. And I think that's where Alexis Mac Allister comes in as well, is that he has the solidity that he offers in midfield, and his versatility has meant that the change in style and the change in the kind of midfield dynamic at Anfield with Gravenberch playing this new role has been a lot smoother than I think it would have been otherwise. So I do.
Are you changing your mind?
I'm not. I'd see where you two are coming from with Alexis Mac Allister. The only thing I would say is I think Jota's contribution to this Liverpool team across seasons is underrated. When you look to the 21-22 season when they won, of course, the League Cup and the FA Cup, we're on the verge of a quadruple. Let's remember, Jota was huge in that season, 15 goals in the league.
But don't you think that season, and this is for me like a pattern with Jota. Yes, he contributed heavily. But that front three towards the end of the year was Mane, Luis Diaz, and Mohamed Salah. And I always feel like Jota has been a big contributor, but I don't think he's ever been like the guy in this team until the start of the season. I think even after that season, Darwin Núñez came in. And of course, it's down to injuries as well, too. But I've always felt like he's like not a side character per se, but never really the guy or one of the main guys for that Liverpool team.
I know what you mean. And it's always, I guess probably injuries are probably a bigger factor than I'm maybe giving credit for. But I do also think that maybe in his last 3 years that was maybe a mistake of Jurgen Klopp's, was not utilising Jota as much as he should have. Like he's always been an incredibly clinical finisher. I think
Jamie Carragher called him the best in Liverpool's history.
Really? Yeah. I mean, that's something.
Which is quite a statement.
I mean, it's pretty
Given
mad.
They've had Suarez, Torres,
Robbie Fowler.
Yeah. I think it was modern history. I don't think he was going like Dalglish and Rush.
But yeah, amazing. And also there was a period also where the narrative was like, oh well, he doesn't really do much else, but he scores goals. It's like, really? Like, did you see him at Wolves? Also, have you seen him play? In certain games for Liverpool,
really
like he's
good too.
Really good in the air, amazing in the air, like a really good dribbler, like is very good at link-up play as well. So yeah, I think he's been quite underrated. I see it with Mac Allister in that, like, over the next few years, he's going to be more influential. But based off the last 4 years, I couldn't not give it to Jota.
Fair enough. Yeah, my thinking with Mac Allister was he's arriving, having to play a new role in a huge step up, like Brighton to Liverpool, massive step up in terms of expectations as well. He's playing a position that he hasn't really ever fulfilled on a consistent basis for Liverpool. He does that really effectively. He still gets 7 goals and 7 assists last year, despite playing a lot of that as a 6. And now he's got them into the Champions League. Key reason for that as well. I think he was 4th for league minutes last year, 3rd this year, and now he feels like, as Leo said at the start, with a whole new midfield arriving, he was kind of the main midfielder last year and really did hold down his end of the bargain. So I can see why
Mac Allister as well too, right? I always think when you're a midfielder, especially of the mold of a Mac Allister, it's always a good sign when you kind of go under the radar and there's not too much noise around you. Because for me, it just kind of shows you're doing your job. If I'm looking at my team's controlling midfielder and there's too much buzz around him, either good or bad, I just feel like a player like that, just getting on with your job and giving you consistent 7, 8, 9 out of 10s, that's the ideal right there. So for that reason, I just think his consistency over the last 12 months has been ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out Mac Allister. Shout out Jota too. Liverpool fans, get in the comments. Who do you think has been your best signing of the last 5 years? I think they're both good shouts. Let's move on to Man City, second in the league at the moment. There's probably one outstanding candidate, Liaz, but I'll let you kick off. Who would you want to talk about?
You know, Savinho has had a really good start. Nah, it can only be one man. Erling Haaland. Not only just for Manchester City, he's probably the outstanding signing of the Premier League in the last 5 years. I think he's completely redefined goal scoring in this league. He breaks records seemingly every single week. He's given Manchester City like a new cutting edge to the way they play. He's like a plan A and a plan B all in one. I mean, his first season there, they won the treble. He scored 50 goals. There's not really too much for me to say here, man. I think this is a straightforward one.
Yeah, I think it's very straightforward as well. I would want to give a couple of shout-outs, though. I think Ruben Diaz has probably gone a little bit under the radar. True. You know, not on Haaland levels of success, but, you know, he's won the Premier League in every one of his seasons there. He's played at least 40 games in the last 4. And he's still only 27 as well. Like, he's got years in the tank. And people forget that when he was signed for, I think it was around £60 million, so not a huge amount of money given what he's produced. He was, I think, their 3rd choice. I think they wanted Jules Koundé. I think they wanted Jimenez as well.
Koulibaly was it that year?
And maybe Koulibaly as well. So he was like 3rd or 4th choice, I think. And I think Man City couldn't be happier with Ruben Diaz as a player, as a leader as well. Never seems to throw his toys out of the pram when Pep occasionally rotates his centre-backs as well. So I'd like to give him a shout-out. Manuel Akanji as well. Bargain. And, you know, had injury issues at Dortmund in his final 2 years. But, yeah, it's been really, really consistent for Man City. I don't think he's really put a foot wrong. He's had to play as a right-back. He's had to play as a centre-back, even on the left-hand side as well. I think he's been brilliant as well. But, Mikey, I assume you went for...
Yeah, went for
Mr.
Haaland
Erling as well.
Went for Haaland as well. If this had been initially when we did this, there was a little bit of confusion. I was cheekily going back just to the summer of 2019.
You wanted this guy in specific.
In which case, Rodri, there's been a lot of debate about who's more important to City, Haaland or Rodri.
Hypothetically, he is included. Yeah, he's not for the sake of this video. Yeah. But does Rodri sway you?
In many ways, I would still. I don't know. I would in some ways still go for Haaland, just because he has not he's just been superb throughout. Rodri really did take a couple of years to really bed into that City team. You know that.
Do you think as long as that? Maybe like a year.
I think the first year was a little.
First year he was having to replace Fernandinho effectively, and he just wasn't as good as Fernandinho, and Liverpool ran away with the title. After that, he did bed in, but even the second season, it was İlkay Gündoğan who was very much City's key player. Yeah. Even 21-22, you could argue that İlkay Gündoğan was more influential. It's only really been since the treble season that unanimously you can say, okay, Rodri is the most vital cog in this City team. Whereas with Erling Haaland, it's like the level that City went to under him, and the fact that Pep was able to change the way that City played and finally delivered a Champions League, I think is really important. And it is so simple that it comes down to the goals, but it does. I was looking into it. I was actually really surprised. Before that treble-winning season, the most goals that any Man City player had ever scored in a Champions League campaign was 7. And that was the year before. That was Riyad Mahrez.
Wow.
I'm not even sure.
Aguero's Champions League record wasn't
I'm not
great,
even
was
sure
it?
Aguero even scored. I think Aguero might have scored 6 one year.
He scored that. The year where he scored the hat trick against Bayern. I'm sure that's the year.
Yeah,
probably.
maybe that year he
Yeah.
scored. But I was looking through it and it was like, oh, who was Man City's top scorer in the Champions League this year? Oh, it was Ferran Torres on 4. Who was it this year? Oh, it was Raheem Sterling on 5.
Mahrez
It was
did
like
have
it was
that really
so
good campaign when they went to the final. That's actually
yeah. So it was either that one or the year after that he got the 7 goals. But so no City player had even hit double figures in the Champions League before Erling Haaland arrived at the club. Like that's how big a difference he's made. And yeah, just the records he's broken. Like he's. I think he's quite actually a bit underrated. His creativity. That's it. Like over the last 2 years, he's registered just 3 fewer assists in the Premier League than Bruno Fernandes, which is pretty mad given that Bruno Fernandes is one of the biggest chance creators in world football. I know he's not had his best start to the season, Bruno, and he splits opinion in other ways, but there's no denying he is a huge chance creator. Yeah. And obviously Haaland is giving the ball to players who are more likely to score and everything, but he still does, get involved otherwise. So yeah, I think it has to be him. But I don't know. Yeah, if it was between him and Rodri, would you go for Rodri?
You bring up a really good case with Haaland. To be fair, and I had kind of forgotten that maybe that first season with Rodri, Liverpool won the league. I think it took him a while or a little bit, as most City signings do, to kind of like learn and embed themselves in the Pep system. And with Haaland, it just felt like from the word go, goals. And like I started off by saying, I just think the way he's redefined goal scoring in this league, it's really, really hard not to say Erling Haaland. We're talking. Yeah. If you want to talk about greatest Premier League signings ever, he's in that conversation already.
Yeah, I mean, I think the release clause was around £50 million, and I think with agents' fees and signing on bonuses, it was 85. Which is still like a great...
That's a bargain.
It's a great bargain.
Yeah.
Huge bargain. I mean, what is that guy worth now? 150 plus? I mean, potentially a world record fee if those fees were still being banded around. Let's move on to Arsenal now. I think this is quite an interesting one. I think there are a few options on this one. Mm-hmm. Liaz, where did you go with Arsenal?
I completely agree. Under Mikel Arteta in the last 5 years, they've basically completely transformed the squad, right? They've gone from a team that, I'm going to be absolutely frank here, we're a laughingstock in terms of the elite sides in England and in Europe. And 5 years later, you look at them, they're competing on all fronts. They're probably the best defensive team on the planet. They are on course to challenge for the league 3 years in a row. So you look at the signings that they've made. Odegaard, I think he qualifies. Yeah, he's in the 5-year period. Odegaard is 1,000% in there. You look at Ben White. I think he's been such a bit of shrewd business. David Raya, you look at him, maybe the confusion at the time. Why do you need a replacement for Ramsdale? I think he's even elevated them in that sense. But for me, the one I really look at, and you've seen since the moment he came in, how good they've been. You've seen them when he hasn't been there. You've seen him when he's returned. And you see how he continues growing year after year after year. I think it has to be William Saliba. When you're talking about best center backs, not even just in the league, but in world football, I think his name ranks extremely high in that regard. Like I said, when he kind of made that breakthrough into the team, they immediately challenged for the league. His first season as a starter there, 50 points after 19 games. He leaves, 3/4 of his way into the season. Arsenal, I wouldn't say it's just because of him, but it was a huge reason. Replacing him with Rob Holding completely capitulated their title defense. Comes back the next year. I think that partnership that he has with Gabriel is absolutely remarkable. I respect everything that Odegaard has done. I think he probably would have been my second choice in that sense. And Declan Rice as well, too. I didn't even give him a shout. Been absolutely excellent, but I think it has to be William Saliba.
Fair. Mikey?
I do differ a bit. I think, Saliba's been immense. I just think Odegaard's ability to come into the team straight away, and I guess Saliba did come into the team straight away and elevate them, but he did have to have those couple of loans. Odegaard's...
Maybe one loan too many, though. It felt like he was very ready.
And I would say Odegaard, I think his first loan at the club, when he came initially on loan, I didn't think he was incredible, to be fair. Actually, I think he came back a little better when he came back on permanent.
He scored 2 in 14.
You say that, but he initially, I was looking at it, he came in, and in that half season, he averaged more, he was creating more chances than anyone else in that team. So he was already making a difference. I feel like just people weren't putting away his chances, but you're right to bring up that squad. Like I was looking at it, that 2020-21 team, only two, Gabriel and Bukayo Saka, are the only players still left at the club who featured among their 11 most used players. You had Nicola Pepe in there, you had Lacazette, Bellerin, Tierney, Aubameyang. I mean, Xhaka obviously was ended up becoming a big part of that initial title challenge. But yeah, like Rob Holding, third for minutes in there, and Bukayo Saka, he was the third biggest minute taker in that squad. And Bukayo Saka was like a teenager then, and he was being overly relied upon. I just think Odegaard came in at a time when like Arsenal were so down in the dumps, right? Like they were, I think in December 2020, they sat 15th in the league, and there was big talk about Mikel Arteta, potentially, having his head on the chopping block there. And it was wild. Like they'd lost to Wolves, Villa, and Burnley at home. And I seem to remember it like very, the Arsenal fan base was split. Like Arsenal fans I knew were split down the middle. There are people now who I know who worship Arteta, who wanted him out of the club.
We've got the receipts.
You won't see them because it's a very exclusive club. But yeah, there were people who really wanted Arteta out. And Odegaard joining the following month, and not the most spectacular start to his Arsenal career, but let's remember he hadn't really, it was the biggest club he'd been at aside from Real Madrid, where obviously he hadn't had the best experience. And, from them making that deal permanent that summer, he's just gone from strength to strength, hasn't he? And I think the other thing is that Arsenal also, in those early days under Arteta and also under Emery, were just bad going forward. Like I think, as bad as they were defensively under Arsene Wenger, in the last few years, their attack was still decent. And in those early years, early year or two under Arteta, they struggled going forward. They were quite boring really, and they lacked a proper creator. And Odegaard came in there and absolutely smashed it. So the first full season that he was there,
they came fifth.
They came fifth. Yeah. And the previous season to that, they'd scored 55 in the league. Compare that to last year, where they smashed their goal record and scored 91. Like the leaps there are massive, and I think that's where it won it for me, at least in terms of Gabriel and Saliba. It was like Arsenal are the best defence in the world right now. I agree, but I just don't know. Like the difference between where they were at before defensively and where they are now isn't quite as much. But I also feel like I would probably be sweating if Arsenal win the league this year, and they do it playing the kind of football that they have played so far this month. Then I would maybe change a little bit, and also they might have to deal with Odegaard Odegaard a little bit this season, which is a problem. Like I think that's a massive problem. I think you take Odegaard out of this team long term. Yeah, I think Arsenal will struggle.
I think the identity that they've embraced I would even go back to last season as well too. Declan Rice bringing him in as well too, adding a bit of physicality, a bit of grit to the guile that they already had there. I think the identity that they're embracing is now becoming a team that we're going to score goals against you, but come even create chances against us. I look at the game last night against PSG. PSG had a lot of the possession. I don't think they threatened Arsenal once outside of a flick from João Neves on. Yeah, that one as well too, right? And I think a huge part of that, again, 1,000. I agree with Odegaard. I think you've actually convinced me a lot more as well too.
Okay,
yeah.
Here we go.
Just in terms from a creative point of view, and also I think something you even didn't say as well too. He took on the armband, where a lot of people thought, is he a natural leader for that? Well, I think that's inarguable now, but.
You had Granit Xhaka in the squad at the time, who many people said was actually the leader in the dressing room.
Different style of leadership,
but for him to be able to take that on and be like, comfortably be the captain. And I think he might have already been Norway captain at the time as well. Like I think he's got that kind of quiet,
more of a lead by example. 1,000%. But there was a moment after that at the very end of that Leicester game where I think Jamie Vardy had a loose ball kind of over the top. And granted, Jamie Vardy's 37 right now. He's not at the peak of his powers anymore. But I just kind of had flashbacks that in that moment, if that was Shkodran Mustafi that he was up against, or that was, I don't even know, Socrates or Rob Holding per se, no disrespect to any of those guys, but I think Jamie Vardy's eyes would have just lit up and he would have gotten on the end of that ball and made something happen. And out of nowhere, you see William Saliba just steaming towards the ball, nudging Vardy off. And for me, that was just like, wow, this is how far Arsenal have come. That a guy like Vardy, probably the biggest rattler in the Premier League, can't rattle this Arsenal team. And I think Saliba has been such a big influence in that change in identity that they've undergone.
Yeah. Absolutely. I wanted to, you did mention him. I think both of you did. I wanted to give a special shout out to Declan Rice because you rarely see £100 million signings like hit the ground running and don't really take a backward step as well. You know, last year, 7 goals, 10 assists, and what he's brought to that side, particularly as a 6, I think even more so than an 8, I think is really pretty special. Crucial to them finishing with 89 points last year. And it felt like that was the signing that made Arsenal fans go like, we can actually win this, like change their sort of innate belief in this side. But I do go back to, well, I'll come on to him in just 1 second. I also think Gabriel deserves a shout out as well.
Has he been fighting the last 5 years?
Yeah.
Ooh,
last 5 years.
great
Right at the
shout.
start of it as well. Didn't necessarily get off to the best of starts, was still bedding in, was learning his trade. He'd only had 1 full year playing regularly at Lille, so was a little bit accident prone. But I think in the last few years, like just completely eradicated the rashness from his game, doesn't go to ground as much, so dominant in the air, which is, you know, Arsenal's crucial weapon. And I agree with Liez, like I think you both said actually, if they are going to win the league this year, they're probably going to still, even without, you know, the Rodri factor and everything he brings in creativity and the whole package, I think they're still going to win it on the basis of their defence. You know, they've conceded 34 goals since the start of last season.
Wow.
City have conceded 40, which isn't bad at all from City, but it just goes to show that feels like the biggest difference that Arsenal can make, because Kai Havertz is doing a great job as a striker, but City just have better depth in forward areas, I think, particularly in the wings, and you know they can make so many more changes that can affect play going forward. But I still went with Odegaard. I feel like if Odegaard doesn't join at the same time as Saliba's emerging into that side, Arsenal could be in such a different position right now, and they don't get the Rice, they don't get the Havertz, they don't get the David Raya. Like, he was the signing that made everyone go, they've just signed someone from Real Madrid. Like, I know he'd been on various loan spells, etc., and he'd shone at Real Sociedad, but it was such a statement signing. Completely different, but when you sign
it was also a bit of a risk as well. We didn't quite know what this player was going to be able to achieve in the Premier League, and yet, he proved to be that trigger to everything else.
But then this was a guy that has been talked about since he was sort of 14, 15.
Oh, he was a wonder kid.
And he was a wonder kid, and you know, it hadn't quite gone to plan at Real Madrid, but he'd shown so many glimpses, and I think it was it Herenveen that he went to, and Real Sociedad, etc. I was really excited when he joined. I kind of agree with Liaz though. I didn't think his first 6 months were as outstanding as I thought they were going to be, but from the start of that next season, I think it was 11 goals and assists in his next year, then 22, then 22. That sort of consistency is amazing, and you see it right now with Arsenal. Like, fully massive respect for them to be in the position they are in the Champions League so far and the Premier League. I don't think they've clicked at all going forward just yet, but to be in every game that they have, you know, is down to that defence. But I think they are just missing that spark that Odegaard provides, and that fluidity and the connections that he fosters in that side. So he makes such a massive difference. So are we all have you changed to Odegaard?
I'm still stick with Saliba, but you got me on the verge. I can't lie. Odegaard was starting to convince me.
Right, let's move on to Chelsea. Now, a lot of signings, as I said at the start of the video, particularly in the last 3 seasons. You know, there is maybe some, you know, further back that we can give some credit to. But Mikey, who's your top Chelsea signing?
This was actually quite tough for me because I have recently fully converted to the Church of Cole Palmer.
Welcome.
He is
I'm a long-term follower.
Like, I mean, obviously he was great last season, but I just wasn't sure. I just wasn't sure that it was, you know, like.
Wait, wasn't sure about what specifically?
I wasn't sure whether he was going to be that good all the time.
Right.
Like,
okay.
I just thought like maybe this is like a 1 season thing, and maybe we'll see his output drop off a little bit because it was ridiculous last year. Also, like, I feel like I was a bit clouded by the fact that he scored so many penalties. So I was like, oh, okay. Wasn't sure how Chelsea were going to function this year as well. So I was a bit like, And so, like, when people were calling for him to start, you know, as a 10 at the Euros, I was kind of like, I don't know. I'm not so sure. Now it's like he's the greatest English player who's ever lived. Like, he's just on another level. But
you're a full-on disciple.
I was discussing it over lunch just before we came in. Actually, I just think I can't remember the last time I had this much fun watching an English player, and that's in an era of quite fun English players. Like Jude Bellingham can be pretty fun.
Rooney, maybe?
Like peak Rooney was amazingly fun. But like even this, like, you know, Bukayo Saka actually is fairly fun, but not on the level of Cole Palmer. Phil Foden should be really fun, but isn't quite as fun as he could be. There's so many fun players. You know, like even Trent Alexander-Arnold's pretty fun in his own way, but.
For as much of a right back can be fun,
So that's the problem. Yeah, he's just, you know, he's limited by his role. But yeah, Cole Palmer is just, he's such a maverick, and also like a bit of a breath of fresh air in terms of his off-the-pitch demeanour as well. Like, in an age where actually, a lot of young English players are actually very, like, and also just very kind of social media savvy and good chatters with the media. Like Cole Palmer just, doesn't stoop to that at all. He will just give reporters blank looks. But I do love him. But it just feels, I don't know. It was hard to look past Thiago Silva, basically. It was hard to look. It was clearly between those two for me. Like Cole Palmer, I think. Free signings, well, I didn't even take that into account, but I just think what Chelsea actually achieved in that kind of lockdown era of football was actually kind of remarkable. The fact that, Lampard had that really difficult half season after signing the likes of Thiago Silva, Havertz and Timo Werner, and then Thomas Tuchel coming in, Thiago Silva really very, very quickly became the heartbeat of that side, and the Chelsea side, which I think conceded only the second amount of I think they conceded 36 goals in that Champions League winning season in the Premier League, which was only second to City. Of course, they only conceded 4 goals en route to that Champions League, which I think is up there with the very best Champions League campaigns of all time. And left last couple of years were a bit more to forget. But the final season wasn't great. But I just think, I think those first 2 years amazing. And I think that second season under Tuchel, when they reached those 2 finals against Liverpool as well, he was just absolutely brilliant, wasn't he? And I think they conceded even fewer goals. I think during that period, like in terms of expected goals against them and Man City, they were basically top 2, and there wasn't much to choose between them. Obviously, it helped that Tuchel did shift them to a more defensive style of play. But I just think
you still got to execute it, yeah.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And there was such a difference, wasn't there, whenever Thiago Silva wasn't playing, and the fact that he came to the Premier League as such an old head, having played in Ligue 1 for so many years, playing in a back 4, then adapting to playing in a back 3. His leadership in that side was invaluable. Won a Champions League. That's kind of what it came down to as well. It's like, well, they did win a Champions League, didn't they? And trophies aren't everything, but Cole Palmer hasn't had that yet. Cole Palmer obviously is a better long-term investment. Obviously, like he's 9-year contract now. It's like Chelsea. This Chelsea project is going to come good at some point, and may well even come good this season. And Cole Palmer will be, the star boy of that for years to come. But Thiago Silva. I love him.
I think it's right to call it out. A lot of Chelsea fans, I'm sure, will appreciate that, Shaq, because it wasn't long ago that Chelsea were really at the top of. Well, they weren't the best side in Europe by any means in 2021, but they were getting to the latter stages of competitions year on year at that stage, and it's only in the last few years that they have kind of become fairly mediocre. But they look like they're on the way back now, and Thiago Silva was a huge part of that. Lies, Cole Palmer, though, you sound like you've been a disciple of this church for a long time. Where is he now in terms of best players in the league? What do you make of him as a player?
I mean, when you said Thiago Silva, there was like a sigh. I was like, oh, I forgot about Thiago Silva. That's an amazing shout, and I think you're actually right. But on the subject of Cole Palmer, you just summed it up really well. Like, he's just fun. He's so nonchalant. His movements are oftentimes looking lethargic, but I just think he's audacious. And at the weekend, right, obviously that 4-goal performance, 5-star performance against Brighton, the free kick is just an absolute joke. The finish from Jadon Sancho's cutback is so ruthless. Penalty spots, we know he's ice cold from the spot. But the thing for me that just took my breath away from Cole Palmer was Chelsea are kind of building up. They're keeping the ball well. I think it seemed like they registered 20 passes at one point. And it just kind of falls to his feet, takes a quick look up, and that audacious pass over the top first time, directly into Nico Jackson's
with
path.
The lift on it,
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, this guy's an absolute joke. That's genius right there. He is just so old school, honestly. The manner in which he plays, I think Maverick is the perfect word for it. He's a breath of fresh air to watch. And when you look at the business Chelsea have done, they've done a lot of business in the last 5 years. And I often look at some of their signings and I think they're good players for sure, but is it good value for money? With Cole Palmer, there's absolutely no question about that. 40 million, I believe, was the 45 million. Looks like an absolute bargain at the current moment. And yeah, man, but Thiago Silva's a free signing. When you're talking about business as well, too, you brought up the Champions League. At that point, That's the difference right now. But also, when you sign a player for free and he gives you that much return on investment, it's hard to say he's not the greatest signing that they've made in the last 5 years.
Yeah. I think
Tough.
it is a really difficult one.
Most goal contributions in the last season those from Cole Palmer in all of the Premier League.
Is
He's been
it in
unbelievable.
Europe that he's second? Is
I think
it
he's second to
Kane?
Kane, yeah.
At his age, I think he'd only started something like 6 or 7 league games for City before joining. He joined on deadline day. They wanted Mikel Arteta. Ended up with Cole Palmer, but it's a happy accident.
Yeah.
Although
They could have
fair,
done
Mikel
both of them.
Arteta would be
Imagine if they got both.
amazing.
That would be
You know,
be
you made a
ridiculous.
really good point as well too, because I don't think you were wrong for thinking last season, how sustainable is the output. The performances, no doubt about it. He's such a talented footballer, but I kind of felt that same sentiment, right? Especially since the whole team seemed to kind of be built around him. As Chelsea got better, would his production remain the same? I think that's a fair question to ask at that point, but yes, he's kind of showing that it is. And B, I think what's even more impressive is last year, you could be forgiven for kind of like as an opposing manager, he might have gone under the radar. Like you're not really game planning against Cole Palmer. So when you don't have as much attention on you, maybe you have more chances to kind of flourish. But this year, without a doubt, he would have been at the top of every single scouting report against anybody that he's playing. The week ahead in training, I'm sure he's the focus for all these managers. So to continue with these performances and this production, when you are now effectively the target for every single team, that's so impressive.
Yeah, it's mad. And on top of that, it feels like, looking back on last season, like he did generally produce some pretty lovely moments in pretty much every game that he played. But at least small sample size, of course, we're only going off the first 6 Premier League games of the season. But it just feels like he's reached a new level. At least in terms of like you were saying, his audacity, just pulling off.
His swagger, man.
Yeah, it's just and maybe it's just because the Maresca system suits him more. But it's just like he just feels like everything he touches turns to gold at this moment. It's like that, the goal against Wolves, the goal against West Ham, like off the post. Like it's just like every, the amount of like goal of the month contenders he already has is just insane. And just the all round play. It just feels like he's become even more fun than he was last year.
Yeah, he's ridiculous. I mean, scored 4 goals twice already for Chelsea. I think he's got 3 Premier League hat-tricks. That's 1 behind Lampard and Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank in that all-time list for Chelsea. We're talking about Frank Lampard, one of the probably the best, undoubtedly the best goal-scoring midfielder in Premier League history. Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank, like 90s legend.
Here's a question for
there.
you, though, because I was speaking to a friend about this, and he was comparing how good Jackson and Palmer have kind of looked at, honestly, for the last 12 months, right? They have a really nice dynamic. Is it something that's maybe, not in terms of quality and in terms of profile, but like in terms of the dynamic and the relationship between the two of them? Is it a bit of a Drogba Lampard in terms of you have Jackson who occupies the entire front line, maybe creates space for Palmer to pop into those attacking positions. You got Palmer who takes the penalties as well too. Is it a similar dynamic?
I think it is a similar dynamic, but it's just more. I think, Palmer certainly, I think, is a more like natural footballer than Lampard ever wasn't he? So you've got that kind of maverick ability.
Lampard
Vic
felt
Vic.
like
I
agree with you.
I think even Lampard would. I think even Lampard's always been set. Lampard's always
He's a
loved
product
saying
of hard work.
how he's like, it's all hard work. I was never the most talented. Like Cole Palmer is so talented in terms of his technical ability. And it is interesting how like Chelsea have spent all this money since Todd Burley and Clear Lake Capital took over in 2022, overspent massively on some players. Some of these signings have are pretty worrying in terms of what Chelsea have actually got for the amount of money they spent, and yet their 2 best signings, probably, unless I'm forgetting someone, are players that they got for £40 million and below. The Nicholas Jackson signing, I think, could go down as one of the best. We're yet to see him. He's not produced like 20 goals in a season yet. He's only had 1 season, but his first one was good. Like I back him to
season,
yes, but that second season
I think
brilliantly.
that comes down to the nature of signings and the pressure that price tags bring as well. This is almost like an episode in and of itself. But if you're signed for £100 million, the expectations on you, the pressures on you, which brings me back to Declan Rice as well, is so much higher. It's so much harder to be a success at that price tag, obviously. Whereas Nicholas Jackson arrives having only started, I think it was 16 league games in the top 5 league. Was wanted by Bournemouth the previous January, then got injured. That deal gets called off. Has that amazing spell at Villarreal towards the end of the season.
That's incredible.
Gets
Football
signed
works
by
out
Chelsea.
like that. By
it's
the way.
crazy how different things could have been. I'm glad you brought up Jackson, because I think in this recent period, like there hasn't been a lot of success as we've already covered, but I think he's probably third in this period in terms of signings behind Thiago Silva and Cole Palmer.
Who was really good as well too? Edouard Mendy. I think when they signed him, obviously tailed off massively, but I think that first season and then even the second season where they went on those runs, I think. At the time, we were looking at him. I think he won best goalkeeper in the world.
Crazy.
Which, look, for a season, he probably was. But yeah, in terms of how he tailed off, obviously.
That was when Jorginho was getting up there for the Ballon d'Or. That was the lost times.
Thomas Tuchel created a lot of careers in that 1 year, man.
Anyway, yeah, I think we've got a clear. Well, so are you guys going with Thiago Silva?
I think you've convinced me on Silva.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, wow. Okay, I'll take that.
Free signing, won the Champions League. It's hard to argue, but Palmer's well on his way to surpassing that.
I'm sticking with Palmer. Chelsea fans, get in the comments. Who would you go for? Let's move on to Spurs. Now, Spurs is an interesting one. I think they've had a lot of good signings, maybe not an outstanding signing just yet, but I think names potentially in the mix. Rodrigo Bentancur, Christian Romero maybe. I think they've been good signings. James Maddison, I don't know whether you guys are going to go there. My backup was Dejan Kulusevski, who I think is a brilliant technician, great footballer, having a great season, playing more centrally. But I don't think he can be their number one just yet because I mean, we were talking about it on the Lowdown a couple of weeks ago. I don't think he's got the numbers his talent deserves. I think outside of Salah and Saka, I said it a couple of weeks ago, there's not that many more talented right wingers in the Premier League at the moment. Amazing at Old Trafford at the weekend, to be fair. 9 chances created. I think that's the most at Old Trafford since Opta records began in the early 2000s. My number one, I don't know whether this is a bit of recency bias being thrown in there as well, but it's Mickey van der Ven. I think he's been absolutely superb for Spurs, except for a small patch towards the back end of last year where Spurs, the kind of wheels fell off a little bit. And Spurs did actually, because for most of last year, the narrative was, oh, it's only when Romero and Van der Ven are out that Spurs suffer. Actually, towards the back end of the last season, they lost a load of games with both of them in the starting 11. But this year, I think he's been brilliant again. He's missed a couple of games, but when he's been fit, that pace, man. Oh, my days. I've never seen a defender move like it. And it makes such a difference. And yes, he's coming off an amazing assist at Old Trafford at the weekend, but he did it against Everton as well. So physically dominant, great in the air. His passing's really underrated. And having that left footer, right footer at the back just opens up so many more passing lanes. I think his relationship with Destiny Udogie is going from strength to strength as well. I think he's a top player, man. He completed 94% of his passes last year. His long-range passing as well was right at the top of any player in the Premier League, any defender in the Premier League that was. He completed over 80%. I don't think there's a thing he can't do, except for at the moment play 38 games. But I think that will come. So he was my number one. But I think there's, unlike a lot of these clubs, guys, I think there's a lot of good shouts. I mean, Leaz, where were you at?
I think Van der Ven is a tremendous signing. I think his partner as well too, Christian Romero, I think has been really, really good as well too. I look at the two of them. I'm still not sure who I think is actually better between Van der Ven and Romero. I think Van der Ven is probably the popular choice at the moment, especially since he came later than Romero, and I think the two of them together make such a good combination. But I think Romero, sometimes it gets underlooked about how quality this guy actually is. Like, yes, he has moments in his game of rashness, maybe a few blunders here and there.
That's the deal you take, don't you think? Because he's so front-footed.
1,000%. I say this about every center back, right? In recent years, people have started criticizing like Vidic and Ramos and Puyol because they can be on the end of like lowlights per se, but that's what you want from your front-footed defender. They're going to lunge into tackles. They aren't going to win it 100% of the time, but that's the risk you take when you have a guy that's kind of covering that amount of ground. I think he's been absolutely terrific. I mean, obviously, the status of player as well, too. World Cup winner. I know that's separate from Spurs, but I think he's been really good. I think Van der Ven is a good shot as well, too. You're right. Spurs, they've created a lot of shrewd deals in the last 12 to 24 months under Ange Postecoglou. I think Kulusevski is a good one as well, too. But Kulusevski is one for me that under Ange is really starting to grow into this new role as a number 10. Maybe on the right, I think he was starting to stagnate. I think his lack of real explosiveness in his game was limiting how elite of a right winger he could actually be. But in this new creative central role, I think he's looking incredible.
Mikey, where were you at with Spurs? Did you have anyone else?
I mean, Liz, who is your pick though? I feel like you.
Oh, did you skirt around?
Yeah, you're yet to make your decision. Okay,
well done. I got distracted by the noise. You keep him straight.
You know what, as well, too, right? It might actually be this guy. I didn't bring him up just now, but it actually just came to me. I think Rodrigo Bentancur has been incredible, and I think people forget Bentancur as well. Came halfway through that Antonio Conte season where Spurs went on this crazy run of four. It was actually Kulusevski and Bentancur together from Juve, and they really saved their season under Conte, made the top four at the end of the year. The injuries are maybe the only thing that would kind of put me off it, but I think in terms of impact and how long he's been doing it for, I think he's definitely a good shout for that.
He's also playing a difficult role this year with Maddison and Kulusevski either side. Like, that's not a natural.
He's really got to hold it down.
Not a natural midfield, or at least the kind of midfields we've seen in recent years. In the Premier League.
And he's not really a natural six either. So it's it is a bit of a wild one. Obviously came off superbly at Old Trafford, didn't it? That system. But
I'll get onto that in a second.
But yeah, I think in general, it like Spurs' surgery on the back line has been remarkable. Like you look back to the peak Pochettino era, and it was like Kyle Walker, Alderweireld, Vertonghen, and Danny Rose, like that.
Trippier in there as well.
Trippier as the backup to Walker.
Yeah.
Ben Davis at peak Ben Davis as a backup to Danny Rose as well. Amazing back line, and I think they might have even had the best defence in the country at one point, didn't they?
Yeah.
And that has been a consistent problem ever since then, for Mourinho and then for Conte and, of course, for Espirito Santo, kind of sandwiched between them as well. Forget about him. But that was a consistent problem for them. And the surgery that they've done since then with, Pedro Porro coming in, Dougie coming in, again, like two wing-backs who have been converted to full-backs by Ange. And then, of course, like Romero kind of kicking off, that spending has been amazing. But to be honest, Diggs, I kind of agree with you. Van der Ven is who I had down. Again, it could be recency bias, but I just think in terms of a centre-back of a fairly unique profile, I think Van der Ven is just the potential that already what he's brought Spurs and the potential what he could bring them in the future is really astounding. I remember when the summer that he eventually went to Spurs, but he was being linked with Liverpool, he was being linked with a host of top clubs. He'd in the Bundesliga at Wolfsburg, he'd received a lot of comparisons to Virgil van Dijk, and the kind of reporting around that was, he's Dutch, he's a big centre back, he can play the ball well, yes, he's going to get compared to Van Dijk, of course, but at the same time, it's like that assist for Brennan Johnson against United, the first thing I thought about was that goal that Van Dijk scored back in his Celtic days, where he basically just makes a very similar run, but ends up scoring a banger at the end of it, and it was just like, maybe they've got a point. Maybe this is the new Van Dijk. And, when you compare, you mentioned his long ball accuracy, very similar, profiles very similar to Van Dijk in that sense, in terms of his, the amount of long balls he completes a game, his progressive pass numbers, very similar to Van Dijk as well. His ability to, sweep up attacks, put out fires, very similar to Van Dijk as well. So I think there is a point there. He's, not exactly the same profile, but I wouldn't want to say that he will ever get to Van Dijk's level on a consistent basis, because that is,
Spurs fans were getting so excited.
That's speaking about one of the best centre backs of the last, of the 21st century. But you never know. And maybe, maybe if Spurs don't end up achieving anything massive under Ange, maybe this will prove to be a stepping stone for him, and he will go on to one of the really elite clubs in Europe.
He's the fastest centre back I've ever seen in my life. I'm going to just put that out there. I've never seen a centre back like this, man. In terms of just pure straight line sprint.
It's amazing.
Varane at his peak was rapid. This guy, it's like he's so powerful with his running as well too. And sometimes I'm honestly afraid, you see a guy of that size and that speed, if he gets an injury, oh my God, if he falls down the wrong way. But the recovery pace as well too, and I think that's so important for the way Ange's team wants to play. They like to play high. They like to leave space in behind. You need a guy that fast to kind of play that kind of football. So I hear it with Van der Ven,
yeah. I think there's a load of good signings in that Spurs squad. I almost want them to. I think they're still betting in under Ange, etc. But it feels like you go through all that side, and we've already said Kulusevski, Bentancur, Maddison, Udogie. I think Pedro Porro deserves a shout.
Pape Sarr as well.
Pape Sarr, Romero, Van der Ven. You're like, what? They should be top four.
I want them to see it in a year. Who knows what Solanke is able to do with this Spurs team? He's really starting to hit the ground running now.
This is true. Right, guys, it was coming. We need to talk about Man United.
Thank you for seeing me on the Lowdown, guys. That's it for me
Turn
this
off
week.
now.
Man United's best signing since 2021. Now, I was having a look at this, and there is a few summers to choose from. There is the summer where you signed Ronaldo, Varane, and Sancho. That was a whole summer.
Yeah, I believe a lot of people said that United won the transfer window that summer.
On paper,
I believe.
And the most recent one as well. People were very excited about. I don't think anyone's going to criticise them too heavily on the basis of 6 games so far this year. But my point is, there's very few options. The big money arrivals in that time: Van der Beek, Ahmad, Sancho, Varane, Ronaldo, Antony, Casemiro, Haaland, Mount, Onana, and then this summer's Yoro, Ugarte, De Ligt, Xerxes, Mazraoui. We'll leave them to one side. But we need a best of that lot. I don't think I even mentioned Lisandro Martinez. He might be the pick. Let's see. Mikey, your best Man United signing in that time.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been... We cut off January 2020. That didn't feature. So obviously it would have been Bruno Fernandes, who has been the best,
Liaz was
the best signing of the post, the post Fergie era, like Bruno Fernandes. Well, this is the thing, like we could have a conversation about of the best Man United signing of the last 10 years, not including Bruno Fernandes, and it would be quite tough, like, because Bruno Fernandes has been arguably the only, well, yeah, in many ways, the only real unqualified success of all United's big money signings.
I think some United fans wouldn't say it's unqualified as well.
You can talk about, but I think that's people being a bit harsh. Like
even if you're a critic, I think value for money, the consistency, no injuries, the numbers, he's got to be the most successful United signing in the last 5 years or 6 years.
Yeah, and then I think Luke Shaw as well. £30 million for an 18-year-old left back who has given what he's given to United. I think Luke Shaw, good signing, but just a shame about the injuries. What could have been, if he'd been fit all of that time as well. But I struggle. I genuinely struggle after that. Really, really tough. Like, there's been some really good servants in there, but not many players who've actually elevated United over the course of a few seasons. And that's why I've gone for Lisandro Martinez out of all those signings since 2020. Again, like, injured for most of last season, but that first season, he really made such a difference to that back line. Him, Varane and Casemiro were such a solid kind of trio, protecting, the kind of middle and back third of the pitch, which I hadn't actually seen at United in such a long time. Nice, like, they really, that kind of, that lovely period of kind of, 2022, start of 2023.
Rash sanity, that's what I called it. Rash sanity, that's what I called it. We had the best player in the world for 2 months.
But it was true. But it was also just the defensive solidity as well. It felt really, really good. And obviously, Varane has now left the club. Casemiro fell off in the second season. But Lisandro, I think, was either way the difference maker there. I don't think you could have just brought Varane and Casemiro into the club and expected them to have worked wonders. I think Lisandro was the key. And I think Lisandro still can be the key alongside De Ligt. And actually, if that United back four stays fit over the course of this season, and say you have Dalot and Mazraoui at right back and Shaw comes back into fitness and comes back into form at left back, then actually I think you do on paper have a very solid back line there. But if you take it out of all those players, though, I think if you take Lisandro out of that, then it starts to look shaky. So I just think in terms of his pure importance to the club right now, had to be Lisandro for me.
Yeah, I mean, Liaz, it's worth mentioning, his first year, third in the league, win the Carabao Cup, reach the FA Cup final, look pretty rosy, and then the disaster of last year happens when he misses the entirety of the year. I mean, how much do you put down to United's recent struggles to the fact Lisandro hasn't been available for all of it?
Here's the thing, right? After Lisandro's first season, I was absolutely in love with the guy. I was looking at the way he was playing, the ball playing, the agility on the ball, the calmness, the ruggedness as well, too. I think after season one, even Casemiro, by the way, was very, very good in that season. For me, he completely transformed United's midfield for 1 year. But I think it's similar to Lisandro, to be honest with you. I think people with Lisandro actually don't take into account how often he's been injured. Like, I think with Varane, the whole story behind him is his unavailability and his unreliableness. Varane played a season longer at Man United than Lisandro Martinez and has missed less games than Lisandro Martinez. Lisandro Martinez has missed 46 games for Manchester United since he joined the club. Varane 42 in a season longer. Wow, so in terms of the impact that Lisandro brought in his first season, brilliant. I think it's also important to note, since he came back from his injury, I don't think Lisandro Martinez has been that great. I think he started the season very, very poorly. And in fact, it looks like he's almost put on a little bit of weight. He looks a bit more sluggish than he did.
I don't know what he was doing with that challenge at Palace as well.
I think, honestly, like these last-ditch aggressive tackles are really coming from a lack of either fitness or like match fitness. I don't think he's looked the same since that big injury that he suffered. I think it was against Sevilla. I know he came back last year for the FA Cup final. But for me, I think Varane was a huge part of that defensive structure that we had for that year. It's probably Lisandro, just because honestly, when you for everything I just said, it's probably still Lisandro because
Would you not put Varane over him though in that sense though? Like if
I think they were just as important as the other.
Yeah.
I think Lisandro, because he was the new signing, because Varane had struggled his first year, it made it like, okay, Lisandro's the difference maker. But I think Varane also, it was a great combination in terms of Varane was more of the recovery defender, in the box defending, Varane was excellent. Lisandro was more of the ball player, more of the aggressor. A guy I want to bring up, right? I don't think he's going to be on many people's lists, and I almost forgot about him because it was a short time, but it was a great time. I think Edinson Cavani was
I nearly mentioned him.
I think he was a really good signing for United, right? I think at the
He
time
got in and got out.
Yeah, I think at the time when we signed him, it was a bit underwhelming because we had just chased Sancho for the whole year, and Cavani had kind of been ushered out the back door at PSG.
Big wages as well,
30,
wasn't it?
33 years old. But it was a free transfer as well, too. And I think Martial had also just come off that brilliant period under lockdown. So Cavani, was this really a guy United at this point in their process of Oli? They should be signing a 30-plus-year-old. But he was really good for us, man. Honestly, came up with some huge goals, was huge on our way to the Europa League final. We came second in his 1 year there. And I know it ended kind of in tears, right? Ronaldo came in, took his number off of him. And he went to Boca Juniors, I think, or Valencia a year later. But for that one season, I think Cavani really gave us a healthy contribution up front for us. Some people might even say Cristiano Ronaldo. I would probably go for Lisandro. But I just think it sums up how lousy United's signings have been since 2021. It's hard to really find one bona fide success in there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think he's been your best at all, but I wanted to give a quick shout out to a player that I hold very close to my heart as well, Amad Diallo. I think the way he's turned around his career as well.
Yeah.
You know, signed for
Sunderland,
huge
yeah.
money, and he barely played very much for Atalanta. Had that really poor loan spell at Rangers, came alive at Sunderland, and had that injury last year. Then comes back. What was it, February, March kind of time? Makes a big difference towards the end of the year, and I think he's playing really well this year.
I think he's our best attacker.
What a note to finish on, guys. Those are all our best signings of the last 5 years for all the top 6 clubs. Massive thank you as ever to Mikey, but a huge thank you to Liez Bouzidi. An amazing debut on the Lowdown. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you for having me on, man. It was fun until we got to the end. The United part, I'll try and forget about that one.
Yeah. And if people don't know where to find you, where can they find you?
Everywhere, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. It's all Twitch even these days. Lias Bouzidi 10. Just waffling about football.
Love it. And he's very, very good at it. He's been a great guest
it.
today. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. Let us know your thoughts about the episode in the comment section, and we'll catch you next week.